Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ivy. If you're new here, I'm so glad that you're here. If you've been here, welcome back. Today we are going to be doing a reading wrap up for every book that I have read so far this year. Breaking the Curses means losing a round. This book just had me sobbing. It's because I didn't give it 4.5 stars. Like, for someone who went to medical school, I don't understand why it's not good. Your person is never someone your sibling has dated. He's down so bad. I hated this book. Why am I 73% of the book and we've only had 4 dates? I would have been sad. It is May, so we're almost halfway through the year, so I figured now is a good time to just go ahead and do a wrap up, maybe give you guys a little insight of what I like to read, how I rate things, stuff like that. Thought it could be fun. So we're gonna start off. First of all, if you see me look over here, I have my Fable up, so I have a list of everything that I've read this year, as well as my rating, because I store them all in there. So I just wanted to preface that before getting started, is that I do have my Fable listed over here, so I can look at it. This year, I set my reading goal as, I think I set it as 50 to begin with, but that was before I realized how busy school and clinicals are gonna be in comparison to like the time that I have to read. So I lowered it down to 20. I have read 13 books so far this year. I'm actually working on book number 14 right now. I've read 13 books so far this year, and so that's what we're gonna be talking about in today's video. All right, you guys, so the first book I read this year, I actually don't have a copy of it because I listened to it on audiobook, and that is Crown Tide by Alex Astor. If you guys don't know what Crown Tide is, it is the 4th book in Alex Astor's Lightlark series. So I'm not really gonna give a summary of Crown Tide because it's so far into the series, but I will let you guys know what Lightlark is about. Lightlark follows our main character, Isla. She lives in this world where they have different realms, and each realm was cursed with something specific. So her realm was cursed to have to eat hearts, but if they fall in love, that person will die. And then each realm has like something specific like that. So some of them can't go in the sun, some of them I think can't go like out at night, just stuff like that. And then she goes to these Centennial Games, which happens once every 100 years, and all of the realms meet together, all the realms leaders, and they compete in these games to try to find a way to break the curse. But the thing is that in order to break the curse, one of the realm's leaders has to die. The leaders are supposed to pick together who goes. But the thing is that the life of each realm is tied to the leader. So if the leader dies, then so does the entire realm and everyone who lives within it. So it's just this dangerous back and forth game of you want the curses to break, but at the same time, breaking the curses means losing a realm. So she pretty much goes in these games to try to break the curse to free her realm, and it just kind of goes from there. I ended up giving Crown Tide 3 stars. It was not my favorite one of the series. I really felt like it was just kind of very much similar to Sky Shade. Like, I think they were just the same book in a different setting. So I didn't love that one, and I ended up just giving it 3 stars. Okay, so the next book that I read was Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. I also don't have a copy of this because I'm waiting just a couple more days to get the paperback copy. I ended up giving Great Big Beautiful Life 5 stars, and it's actually one of my favorite books that I've read this year. And it follows our main character, Alice, and she is a journalist, and there is this famous family in this world, the Ives family, and so she gets an interview with Margaret Ives to kind of write a biography about her. So she goes there and she finds out that she's competing with another writer, and that is our male main character, which is Hayden Anderson, and they are both interviewing Margaret separately and hearing her stories separately, so Margaret can interview them and see who she wants to write their book. But the thing is that they cannot talk about their interviews. So whatever Margaret tells Alice cannot tell Hayden, and vice versa. It was such a good book. This book was so much more than a romance, which was very interesting. I heard so many mixed reviews. Some people loved this book, some people hated this book, and I think it's just because it did feel a lot different than most Emily Henry books, because it was mostly like a fiction story, because we were really diving into the Ives family, which I really liked. I really liked that interview style of them kind of diving into something else other than their relationship. But then we also were getting to see them connect, and it was this push and pull of like, but they're competing, so do I want this job, do I not, or would I rather be with him, stuff like that, while also diving into Margaret's life, which her life was just so interesting, and I really liked that aspect of the story. I think it was an interesting take on a book. I was reading this book and I was finishing it, and I closed the book, and then I realized I was crying. I wasn't even aware until after I closed the book, and then I was like, this book just had me sobbing. And then I was just sitting on my couch for like, I'm not even kidding, 10 minutes, literally just staring, trying to like wrap my head around what I just read. I think this book was so good, and it is literally one of my favorite Emily Henry reads and one of my favorite books from this year, 100%. I absolutely loved this, and I definitely think like it's a must read. Okay, the next book I read this year, I actually own, and it is The Do-Over by Lynn Painter. This is a YA romance book with a Groundhog Day trope. So it follows our main character, Emily. Nick. Okay. That's not what I thought these characters' names were. So it follows our main character, Emily, and she has this checklist of things. Like, she just believes in like this perfect setup of love, that it goes exactly like this to a checklist, and she has this really big ideas of what love is supposed to be like, what falling in love is supposed to be like. So she's been dating this guy in her school, and it's finally Valentine's Day, and she has this big plan of how everything's gonna go. She's gonna tell him that she loves him, all of these things, and the day just does not go how she thought it was going to. So she ends up at her grandmother's house. When she wakes up the next morning, it is Valentine's Day all over again. She runs into who ends up being our male main character, Nick, and he plays a really big role in kind of her breaking out of this Groundhog Day trope. This is how love is how life is vibe that she's got going on. And I thought it was really good. I sat and I read this in one sitting, which you can do with pretty much all Lynn Painter books that I've read. You can sit and read them in one sitting. I ended up giving this book 4.5 stars. I thought it was really good, but at some point I just felt like it was getting repetitive. Not the day, but the way you would solve it. It's like, just know how it could have been so easily solved. They just weren't doing that. And sometimes when I'm reading books, sometimes that bothers me, sometimes it doesn't. In this particular one, it did, so I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. I didn't give it 4.5 stars. I gave it 3.5 stars. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars because it was like a good, quick-paced read. Wasn't that memorable, really. And yeah, I just apparently need to get my eyes checked because it says 3.5 on the screen. But yeah, 3.5 stars for the do-over, and it's a Groundhog Day trope. So if you like stuff like that, maybe pick it up. If you don't like that, maybe avoid it. But like, not every day is the same. It starts the same, but like it doesn't end the same, obviously. I don't know. Lynn Painter's just a good, quick, fast read. When I went into this book, I wasn't aware it was YA. That really shocked me. I don't know why I didn't think it was YA. I bought this book so long ago. Yeah. All right. The next book I read is Assassin's Blade by Sarah J. Maas. I actually listened to this one on audiobook, and I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. If you guys haven't watched my Throne of Glass videos, I have 2 videos up now, me reading Throne of Glass and me reading Crown of Midnight, so you can go check them out. But Assassin's Blade pretty much is a prequel to the entire Throne of Glass series. And there's like several different places within the series that you can choose to read it. I read it first, and you pretty much just follow Selena through a series of different short stories and events that she will mention in Throne of Glass that kind of like lead her to where she starts the story in Throne of Glass. I really liked it. It's the first time meeting a lot of characters. It's your first time meeting Selena, and it's just really kind of introducing you to a world while also acting like you already know the world. And I thought it was really good. It's just, I think because I read it before Throne of Glass and not really knowing anything, and because it's just a bunch of short stories and there's not like a one concise like thing happening, it's just kind of like leading Selena to where she's gonna go. I ended up just giving it 4.5 stars, but I really enjoyed my time reading this, and I was really shocked by it because I didn't have high hopes going into this series, and I was pleasantly surprised by reading this because it just gives that 2012 fantasy era writing that I personally really enjoy. The next book I read I also don't own, but it was In Your Dreams by Sarah Adams. It's the 4th and final book in the When in Rome series, which I personally have really enjoyed my time reading this series, but I ended up giving this book 4.5 stars. It follows Madison, which is Noah's sister. So Noah's the male main character in the first book. The rest of the books I all follow one of his sisters. This book follows Madison. She is a chef. She moved to New York. She's like known as the free spirit in her family. She always kind of wanted to do everything, and she never really stuck to one thing. She always wanted to try a bunch of different things, where the rest of her family kind of like pick something and they kind of hone in on it. She kind of just wants to do everything. So she ends up moving to New York to pursue culinary art, and she just isn't happy there. She develops really, really bad anxiety in regards to the kitchen, and so she moves back to Rome, Kentucky, and this is where we meet our male main character, who we've seen in some of the other books, and we've seen their banter kind of back and forth within the other book, James Huxley, and he is her brother's best friend, but they've always had this rivalry. So James is a teacher, and before Madison went to pursue being a chef, she was also a teacher, and they just competed back and forth all the time about everything. And so they just kind of had this like really nagging banter where they just didn't like each other. And then we follow their story because he opens a restaurant for her to work in, and it's just kind of, you know, them starting this restaurant together and her getting over her hump of anxiety and then like falling in love together. I don't really remember like my thoughts on this book and why I gave it 4.5 stars. Probably because it was good. It's because I didn't give it 4.5 stars. Oh my goodness. one of these days I'm gonna get it right. I gave it 3.5 stars. I was like, 4.5 sounds really high for something I cannot remember. 3.5 stars, probably because it was just good and it wasn't bad. I don't know. This book isn't super memorable. Like, I don't really know what happened in it. Like, When in Rome and Practice Makes Perfect, I can tell you what happened in those books. I think they were both really good. The rest of the series kind of just all blended together to me. So I couldn't really tell you more than just like that little synopsis. I don't know my thoughts on it. All I know is that I read it and I gave it 3.5 stars. The next book I read was Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. This is the book that got me back into only reading Abby Jimenez for a week. After that, Part of Your World is the beginning of like another one of her little series, and it follows our female main character is Alexis Montgomery, and she's a ER doctor, and she comes from this really prestigious family of surgeons. Her family for generations has owned Royam Hospital, and it's like this really big prestigious hospital that everybody wants to work at and everybody wants to be a part of. She ends up in this town of Ocon, which happens to be the town that Daniel is from, and her car breaks down, and so he's there to help her fix her car, and she ends up completely, like, they have really good banter going back and forth, and she thinks that she will never see him again, and then somehow, some way, he keeps thinking about her. One of them, I can't remember who, ends up calling the other, and then they end up meeting up, and they realize that they come from two very different worlds. And we meet Alexis right after she's come out of a very tumultuous marriage, a very abusive emotionally marriage. Was it a marriage? A marriage or her boyfriend, I can't exactly remember, but he was very emotionally abusive to her, very controlling, very manipulative, and so she doesn't find herself wanting to be in a relationship, and especially not with Daniel because he is 10 years younger than her. I ended up giving this book 3.5 stars as well. And that is because as much as I loved this book, the ending was so predictable and we could have come to it so much sooner. Our characters could have came to it so much sooner because the whole kind of conflict is that she doesn't feel comfortable bringing him around her family and kind of uprooting her life to be with him. The answer was so clearly right there, and it was just bugging me so bad at some point as I was reading the book. I was like, okay, like the answer's literally right in your face. Like, for someone who went to medical school, I don't understand why it's not clicking for you, but obviously they end up getting there. It's just the fact that it took us so long to get there was driving me literally insane. That's why I ended up giving it 3.5 stars, because I just started to get aggravated with the whole back and forth and not just like realizing that it was an easy fix. But other than that, it was really good, and like I would have liked the book so much better had it not just been for that one little, it's not even miscommunication, it's just like not solving your problem and it was just bothering me. The next book I read was book number 2 in the Part of Your World kind of series, and that was Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez, which I also don't own a copy of. I think a lot of these books I don't own physical copies of them because I've been really good about borrowing things from Libby or reading things that are on Kindle Unlimited, so I don't own a lot of these books that I'm talking about. But this book was really good. I gave it 4.5 stars after reading it. So this book follows Alexis from Part of Your World's best friend, Brianna, and she is also a doctor, and she just got divorced, and her brother is sick and he needs a kidney donor in order to be able to live. So she's a caretaker for her brother. She's living in her mom's house that's really old and outdated, and she's just kind of falling into like crisis. And then she is working at the ER, and they get a new doctor because Alexis left, so they need a new doctor, and so they bring in our male main character, which is Jacob Maddox, and he comes off as very kind of grumpy and rude, and everyone is just like he's awful and terrible, when actually he just has really bad severe social anxiety, and so he's not good at talking to people, especially in a new environment. Being around new people is really hard for him, and they end up meeting in a closet when she goes to have a little mental breakdown in the closet, and he tries to just escape to get a breather from all the new things. They end up meeting, and she realizes he's not as bad as he seems, and they start connecting. And what I loved about this book, it's a fake dating trope, so they end up fake dating because his brother is going to marry his ex-fiance, and he doesn't want people to think he's still hung up on her and still mad, so they start fake dating so that his family doesn't think that he's sad and depressed and like lonely because his brother's marrying his ex-fiance, which I personally think is crazy because your person is never someone your sibling has dated. Just throwing that out there, especially if they were engaged. Like, your person is never someone that your sibling was previously engaged to. and she broke off the engagement to get with his brother. So he has every right to be upset, but he's such a people pleaser. His anxiety is so bad that he feels guilty for being mad at his brother and feeling like he was wrong. But this book is so good because Brianna understands his anxiety so well, and she's so just careful with him, and she really adjusts for him and makes him feel 100% comfortable. And as someone with really bad anxiety, I will say reading this book did trigger my anxiety a little bit, but for no other reason than the fact that my anxiety there isn't like a root cause. Like he has a cause, like social settings cause him stress. So as long as he's like, if he's by himself at home, he's like pretty much fine. If he's with his core group of people, he can be fine. But big group, family events, stuff like that really cause his anxiety to run rampant. And I also think it's just a constant mention of anxiety that then you start focusing on your own and like trying to like relate to it. And I do like that it feels seen and that there is someone out there who can be there for you and accept you for that instead of despite that. And I think reading a book like that was really good. It just did cause me to be a little bit more anxious. So I ended up giving it 4.5 stars for no other reason than it just didn't give me the 5-star feeling while I was reading it. It was still a really, really good book. And I think that if you have anxiety and you're like Jacob, I recommend picking it up. Like I said, I have really bad anxiety. The subject matter is just so important because he talks about being medicated and how without his medication, like he wouldn't be able to get through his day. And that's not like a bad thing because he's still able to be successful. He's still able to lead a good life. He just had to learn to live with it, and he had to, you know, take medicine to be better. And sometimes like that just is the answer. And so I think reading something like that is really good, especially if it's a new diagnosis for you or it's just not something that you know a lot of people with or it's not common for you. I don't know. I think seeing it represented in a book is really cool, especially seeing it represented through a male main character, because I think mental health in men isn't talked about often either. And so seeing it from a like written in a man's POV and seeing him like kind of embrace that, I think is also, I don't know, I just really liked that aspect of it because again, it's just not something that you see a lot. And I think just seeing someone be completely accepted for who they are was really good. So I absolutely love this book, and I honestly just love everything Abby Jimenez writes. I haven't read many books, there is one, but I haven't read many books that I dislike or like really struggled reading. So yeah, definitely pick it up. Honestly, pick up anything written by her and you'll have a good time. The next book that I read is one you guys have been here for, and it was Throne of Glass by Sarah J Maas. I ended up giving this book 4 stars, and I'm not going to go into a really big rant on this because like I said, I have a video already up on my channel with all my spoiler thoughts and reactions to reading this book and my final thought. But I was honestly, like I said, really pleasantly surprised about this book. It follows Selena, and we just watch her go and compete to be the king's assassin because she is a trained assassin. The king needs someone to work for him, so he gathers together all of these people, assassins, people like that, and he has them compete to be his champion. And that's kind of like where this book picks up. But 4 stars for this one. And like I said, the video's on my channel if you want to go see my reactions to reading it. The next book I read was Crown of Midnight, which you guys were also here for. This was a 5-star book for me. I thought it was so good. I did have a couple things spoiled for me in here, but other than that, this book was amazing start to finish, and I absolutely loved it. Again, this video is also up on my channel if you guys want to go check it out. It has all my spoiler thoughts, reaction, and stuff like that. And then the next book I read was Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez, and this book was also a 5-star read. So I had 2 5 stars back to back, which is crazy when I tell you guys that Just for the Summer, if you want acts of service, if you want just golden retriever male main character but in the best way, because I don't know how I always feel about golden retriever male main characters, but run and pick this book up. So this book follows Justin and Emma, and they both have this curse where whoever they date ends up breaking up with them and then immediately finding their person and getting married to the next person that they date. So they end up connecting on Reddit when Justin posts something talking about his curse. And so Emma, why does it not feel like that was her name? Emma, she ends up reaching out to him saying like, I have this curse too. And so they realize they have really good chemistry. So they come up with this plan to date one another so that the next time they break up, they both can find their person and kind of like break the curse because they felt like it would cancel out. And so she's a travel nurse. So she ends up coming to Minnesota to be with him. And we just watch this whole interaction of them fake dating, even though they're like actually dating. There's a list of things they have to do to complete in order to like break the curse or for the curse to activate. And so Justin is just peak male main character. Abby Jimenez has recently said that her editor or publisher or something said her next book after, not the book she just released, but the one coming out in 2027, somehow that male main character beats out Justin, and I just don't think it's possible because this man will do anything for Emma. He's down so bad and he is literally perfection. I loved this book and I definitely 10 out of 10 recommend this. Like, get through Part of Your World. Yours truly, a great time and experience just so you can get to Just for the Summer. It is so good. And the twists and turns in this book, honestly, there was like a big plot twist that I did not see coming, and I feel like maybe I should have, but I was just so enamored by their relationship that I wasn't even paying attention to really anything else that was going on. So when this happened, I was like so shocked. 10 out of 10 recommend this book. 5-star read, bordering on 6-star. Like, it was so good and I 100% recommend it. Okay, so the next book I read was Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young. This book has been on my TBR for so long. My sister actually bought this for me as a present because I wanted it so bad, and she ended up being able to find it, so she bought it for me. And I was so excited to read this book because quite literally everyone who has read this book loved it. I'm actually gonna look up the rating, like the overall rating for it. Yeah, so this book has a 4.23 star rating on Goodreads. I hated this book. I ended up giving this book 2 stars, which is so sad because A, it was a gift from my sister. 2, I was so excited to read this book because everybody loves this book. This book follows Win and Bo, and they end up meeting on Halloween, hooking up, and then it's an accidental pregnancy trope, so you just watch them through this pregnancy. I had so many issues with this book. I started reading this book so many times. Literally, I think I've been reading it since like last year, and I would just stop reading it, and it was sitting on my nightstand for so long, and then I finally put it back on my bookshelf, and then I was like, okay, found it on there's a bookmark in here. I found it on Hoopla, which is like a Libby but different, and I found the audiobook on there, and so I was like, whatever, I'll listen to it because truly it's not that bad, and maybe it's just like I don't like the font or something like that. No, it's just this book. I do not like this book. I do not like, it's so descriptive, but in like a way that's really drug out, in my opinion. We're just talking about things I feel like we don't need to be talking about. I think the characters kind of also feel insta-lovey in a way, which I get, like she's pregnant with his baby. It's like an insta-love Philly type situation. I just didn't like this one at all. And then especially the ending, why did it switch to third person? Like, we just started talking in third person, and I meant like we went from a paragraph talking in first person the way we had been talking this entire time to third person like we were the baby. Why? Why did we do that? And then we went to an epilogue and we jumped 10 years. 10 years. An epilogue's usually like 2 years later. 10 years? What do you mean? That was crazy to me. I was like, what do you mean? These are not even the same characters. And I'm not a person, like sometimes I feel like epilogues are not necessary, but I read them anyway. And I never really have strong opinions on the epilogue. They don't help or break the story. Sometimes they help the story, but usually they don't ruin the story. This one is like, why would it be 10 years? Like, do you know how much time and how much stuff changes in 10 years? And you're just like throwing me into these characters. And mind you, you're just throwing me into a scene with these characters. You're just randomly throwing in updates, but they're not even updates that are relevant to us because we watched her have this dream for the entire story, and you would think the epilogue would be like them showing that she achieved that goal or that dream. It's not that. That's not what happens in the epilogue. The epilogue is just literally a random scene in the foyer of their living room, like literally their entryway 10 years later. We don't even know these people anymore. It's been 10 years. Not to mention we barely saw their relationship, but we didn't even see them with the kid to begin with. So what do you mean that kid's 10 years old? 2 stars for this book. I have rarely ever rated something that low, but this one was bugging me listening to it, and it bugged me with the epilogue. I just didn't like this book, which I was so sad about. The next book I read was also by Abby Jimenez, and it was Say You'll Remember Me, and I ended up giving this one 3 stars. Let's get into it because this is the one Abby Jimenez book where I've had really strong opinions on why the rating was not higher. This book follows Xavier. He's a vet in Minnesota, and he had a really hard relationship with his parents where they were also kind of abusive. And so his whole goal was like, he put himself through vet school, he opened this clinic, and he is just working his ass off to prove to his parents, like, look what I did. And then we have our female main character, Samantha. She meets Xavier when she takes her kitten to the vet for the weirdest reason. Read the book if you want to know why. Just not something I ever thought was real. And he was a complete ass to her, and she told him, she was like, you're an asshole. And then he becomes completely infatuated with her, and vice versa, that she was like obsessed with the fact that he was rude. Whatever. She comes back to the vet to get her cat looked at one more time, and he literally mid-appointment was like, go on a date with me. Second conversation. The first one, you didn't even ask her anything about her. You just knew her name because it was written on the cat information. Second of all, what about my cat? Like, that's what I'm here for, is my cat. Whatever, she says yes. So they go on this date and they immediately hit it off, and this book is so insta-lovey in a way I've never experienced in my life. I have heard that phrase thrown around so often. I was like, I've never read anything like that. Enter Say You'll Remember Me. What do you mean? I was 23% of the way through this book, and they had two interactions. They had the two vet interactions and one singular date that, as they mentioned multiple times, lasted 12 hours. Anyway, after that 12-hour date where they pretty much fell in love, Antha ends up having to go to California because her mom has dementia, and so she wants to help her family take care of her mom because it's slowly progressing, and so we follow her journey with that. And this whole time she told Xavier, she was like, just forget about me, and it jumps like 3 months and he's still thinking about her. So he books a ticket to California without her knowing, and then contacts her and is like, hey, I'm here. Where they go on another date and they spend 2 days together, and then he goes back home and they don't speak again for months, and because it jumps timelines again. And now you're 50% of the way through the book, and we've had the 2 conversations at the vet, which, hey, we're about a cat and asking you to go on a date with me, the 12-hour date that we're still somehow talking about, and then the 2 days in California. And she quite literally says, if I was in Minnesota, I would have already started dating him and we would have been in a relationship and I would have already been moved in with him. What the actual fuck do you mean? And what do you mean? Like, sorry guys, I got a notification about my front door, and I was like, my front door? Everything's fine. Anyway, what was I talking about? I was talking about Say You'll Remember Me and how insta-lovey it was and how obsessed they were with each other without even knowing each other. And I get it, like, if your person's your person, like, that's good and great and dandy. However, why am I 73% of the book and we've only had 4 dates? And the whole book is long distance. They go months without talking to each other. We keep jumping months. 3 stars for the book because I liked the relationship when they were together and when they had been together longer. They're starting to act like somewhat normal, but also at the same time, like, we got to get it together. We got to get it together. Like, the whole issue I saw being solved, like, I was looking it dead in the face. The insta love was bugging me so bad because it's so unrealistic and it felt like whiplash. No, I'm not even kidding, because whenever he said, "We go on a date with me?" I literally flipped the page back 2 pages and reread 2 pages to make sure that I didn't skip something, because he literally, he was like, oh, I'm just checking for after surgery because you got the surgery taken care of. And then she was like, yeah. And then he was like, go on a date with me? And she was like, yeah. What? Why? Why are you doing that? Why are you saying that? So that was the first time, and hopefully my last time experiencing insta love, because not a fan in the slightest. Okay, and then the final book that I have read so far this year is Just Friends by Haley Pham. I don't have my copy with me. My sister is borrowing it because she wants to form her own opinions on it. I also have a video up of this book if you guys want to go check that out and see my full review. But this was also a 5-star read for me. This book follows Declan and Blair, and it's like a second chance romance. They were childhood best friends. They dated for a couple of months, I think, in high school, and then this big event happened where they didn't talk to each other, and so they haven't talked to each other in 4 years. And Blair finds herself back in their hometown of Seabrook, and she goes to get a job at a coffee shop, and enter Declan. And so we watch them kind of get together, but at the same time we watch her kind of grieve so many things. Honestly, the book was really good. Was the plot simple? Yes. Were there things in it that weren't probably like typically what you would like write in a book? Probably. I still really enjoyed the story. I enjoyed my time reading it, and when I finished I was still thinking about it, and so I gave it 5 stars, and I know that's just not a common consensus for it, and that's fine. I personally really liked it, and I will be tuning in to more books that she writes just to see how it improves and see if it was like kind of a one-off thing. But yeah, I am currently reading Promise Me Sunshine by Cara Bastone, so that's going to be book number 14 of the year. I do think I'll meet my 20 number goal and maybe hopefully go over it. It's just I haven't had a lot of time to read, and so I didn't want my goal to be so high, because if I don't meet it, I unfortunately will be sad. And I know it's not that serious, and I know it's not that deep, but I would have been sad. But yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. Let me know if you have read any of the books that I have talked about in today's video and what your rating for them was. Do we have any of the same ratings? Did you rate something lower, higher? Let me know. I'm down to hear your guys' opinion. I actually want to hear you guys' opinion. I love hearing how subjective reading is. I honestly love to hear when somebody really loves something that I didn't, because I'm like, I wish I could experience it through your lens, because whatever you read sounds amazing, and whatever I read, there's no way they were the same thing, even though I know for a fact that they were. And that's what I love about reading, is just how subjective it is and how everyone can have a different experience reading the exact same words on paper. So yeah, let's talk about it in the comments, because I would love to know. Let me know what other kind of videos you guys want to see, and hopefully I will see you guys in the next one. Bye guys.